the NFL offseason involves Brandon Aiyuk, the superstar receiver of the San Francisco 49ers, who Harry Douglas, our receiving expert, told us if he was in a different offense, would be capable of putting up numbers that look a lot more like those that are put up by the very top level receivers in the NFL. He requested a trade earlier this week. Dan Graziano, my insider, I start with you. The 49ers clearly do not want to trade him. What have you been hearing about the possibilities here?
The teams that are calling the 49ers in the wake of the trade request are being told the same thing they've been told all offseason, which is no, we have no interest in trading him. The Niners and Brandon Aiyuk have talked about a contract extension. They do not seem to be in agreement on what that would look like at the moment, and I don't know that that changes anytime soon. We have seen in the past, Deebo Samuel requested a trade a couple years ago. Yeah. They ended up getting to a contract before training camp or early in training camp, and that all got taken care of. I don't know that that's how this works this time. Brandon Aiyuk may have a decision to make about whether and when he wants to go to training camp if the 49ers hold firm, which as of now they are.
Which is what brings me to Ryan Clark. So for those of you who have seen the clips of Brandon Aiyuk doing an interview very recently, the last 2 weeks or so, it was on The Pivot. It was on RC's podcast with the guys, and he made it clear in that, I'd like you to explain, because the bottom line of it is, if Brandon Aiyuk is going to get out of San Francisco, he's going to have to force his way out. Did you feel when you were talking to him like you were sitting with a guy who's ready to do that?
I didn't. I didn't feel like I was sitting with a guy that was ready to force his way out. He was trying to will his way out. He was trying to almost reason with the San Francisco 49ers. If you aren't going to pay me, if I'm not going to be a guy who gets paid like an Amon-Ra St. Brown or more, I don't want to be here. And the point he was trying to make to me was saying, listen, I don't get the touches or the opportunities. I don't get to be put in motion. I'm not one of those guys they use as a chess piece. I'm the dude that stands across from the number one corner on the other side, and I beat him. I'll play him. I route him up. And he was trying to say, based on that, if you compare me to all of these dudes that got money, I'm as good as every single one of them outside of Justin Jefferson. He walked in to the sit-down with Jaden Daniels. I didn't call Brandon Aiyuk. We didn't reach out to him to come on our show. He called us. This was something he wanted to talk about after for most of the offseason being pretty quiet until we saw the FaceTime with Jaden Daniels. He feels like he's being undervalued in San Francisco. Not only undervalued, he feels like his play, his opportunities can have an uptick somewhere else that's not so built around Kyle Shanahan and other pieces.
So what should be happening right now around the league, general managers?
Yeah, they should be calling San Francisco, and I don't think the verb is willing his way out. I think it's more of the word patience, and here's why, because the whole idea, it's a hold in. So if he's there day after day not practicing Greeny, and on, let's say, the right day, the Buffalo Bills say, you know what, we just cleared some cap space. We're going to spend a number one pick next year on a receiver anyway. We're going to give him a number one pick. And John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan look at each other and say, like, he's not going to be here next year. It's a more and more of a distraction, and we could get a first-round pick. Let's cut our losses. That's how it's going to have to happen. And we're probably at least 3-4 weeks away from that scenario. But having a hold-in of a key player not practicing, that wears on an organization.
What do you think, Domonique?
Yeah, I think that they might be willing to move on from him and trade him if somebody would have blocked Chris Jones at the end of last year's Super Bowl. Them not winning a Super Bowl in the last several seasons in this window that they've been in, I think, has kind of hurt them. And they're in a position now where they have a team that's capable of winning a Super Bowl, and they're going to do whatever it takes to keep them together and continue to make this run. And as easy as people suggest the Shanahan offense is to step into for a quarterback, historically it hasn't been that easy for receivers. And even Brandon Aiyuk, it took him some time to get on Kyle Shanahan's good side. So assuming that either of these rookies that they've drafted is going to step in and be able to replace him is unlikely. I think what they want, best case scenario, is probably figure it out with Brandon Aiyuk and maybe move on from Deebo or someone else in their weapons group more than Brandon Aiyuk, because I think while he is not the most, flexible of their players, he might be the most impactful because of what Ryan said off the top. He takes the attention of the number one corner. He's the receiver that is going to take that away, that allows Christian McCaffrey to go to slot, go to backfield, and Deebo to do all those things, and George Kittle to line up in a slot every now and then, and to block the end man. Like, all this stuff is interconnected, and I think it would be foolish to assume that they could move on from Aiyuk just because his numbers aren't as big as we think they should be.
Yeah, that's the Debo point is very interesting because the guaranteed money on Debo's contract runs out after this season. So right now they got to pay Debo $22 million. They have a lot of big numbers on their budget, right? McCaffrey and Trent Williams and Fred Warner. I mean, this is an elite roster, and they're paying it like one. So I think if they can get Brandon Aiyuk through this year, then at the end of the year, they have a decision to make on which guy, whether it's Aiyuk or Debo, and that may come down to who wants to take what deal. But I do think they feel like they have to keep it together. We did it after the trade request came out. My editors at .com said, hey, can you put together a list of like five best fits?
Yeah.
And I was like, the best fit is San Francisco.
Right.
Like, that's where, like, he's perfect there because he does do things that other people in that offense don't do.
Louis Riddick was on here the other day with a stat: 81% of his catches went for touchdowns or first downs this past year. So I guess what I'm asking you is hanging in the balance here potentially a Super Bowl contender? Is this San Francisco, is it literally a question of yes or no, with or without him? And then you look at Buffalo, you look at Washington, you look at any other team.
I think San Francisco suffers without Brandon Aiyuk greatly. I think Brock Purdy takes a step back, and there's some regression in his game without Brandon Aiyuk. Just look at the way he was able to win, especially in the playoff game versus the Detroit Lions. When you watched him line up, when it was one-on-one, when you tried to shade him with the safety, he found ways to make plays. And you think of so many of the timing routes that happen outside of the numbers, it's Brandon Aiyuk. Yes, he operates to Kittle inside the numbers. He operates to Deebo Samuel inside the numbers. But when we're talking about those timing routes that have to be precise, that have to be right now, Brandon Aiyuk is that guy. And so I think everything changes for the San Francisco 49ers if he's not on this team this year, more so to me than if you lose a Deebo Samuel, as Dan mentioned.
That we are starting to get some of our capabilities back, so we may have a little video. Along the way, you might see a graphic, and we are going to do Sneaky Hembo. The one thing that continues to work somehow is Domonique Foxworth live, clear as a bell from Washington, D.C.
I'm doing the best I can. I'm doing the best I can. I'm not working nearly as well as Dan Graziano, though. Dan Graziano is fly as hell today, and I'm jealous.
Yeah, he clean.
Look at him.
All right. Let me ask my fly friend then one quick question before I get into what I think is the most important question of the NFL offseason, or at least what will be the biggest question as training camps begin and the preseason begins. But let's start with an injury update. The AFC North last year was a division where everybody was good and everybody was in it seemingly to the very end. And that included the fact that arguably the best player, or one of them, missed almost the entire season. And that's Joe Burrow with a pretty serious injury to the throwing wrist. Where are we with his recovery? Should we expect him to be perfectly fine and himself when the season begins?
I don't think anyone's 100% certain, probably including Joe Burrow. Like, so far, encouraging results throughout the offseason in terms of how he's throwing the ball, and I know they're happy with it, but it's an unusual injury. Oh, look at this. We got video. It's an unusual, I know, right? It's an unusual injury because we haven't seen it too much with quarterbacks on the throwing hand. We know what it looks like to come back from an ACL tear, as difficult as it is, an Achilles tear, as difficult as it is. This is not a recovery that we have a lot of a template for. So there are theories, right? Is it going to start to bother him more as his volume of throws increases? Is it going to alter his throwing motion? I think until those questions can be answered, I don't think anyone's going to feel 100% confident. He could be fine. He could be absolutely fine. We just don't know.
Well, you know who has seen him throw recently? Is my man Ryan Clark at that fancy white party that I wasn't invited to, you and your buddy Michael Rubin had out there in the Hamptons. But don't think I didn't see it. Don't think I didn't see Burrow out there looking awfully good. And I saw that there seemed to be like a football game on the beach, right?
Yeah.
Was Burrow throwing?
No, Burrow was not at that game. There was
throwing.
No, there was this other quarterback. What's that guy's name?
Was it Tom Brady?
Oh, look at that.
Clean, though. Look at that. We got pictures, and that's a pretty good one to have up.
Hey, man, what a day. Yeah. We're going to invite Greeny next year.
We'll get to that. But let me ask you about, but did you get any sense from Burrow, your LSU guys?
I actually talked to Joe in France. We were at Sports Beach, and
this gets better and better.
Yeah, and he was telling me, he said, okay, I have to adjust what I do. He said, when I'm healthy and when I'm out there, I play exactly how I want to play. And we talked about last season, especially the San Francisco game, he felt like he was coming along. And so he started to talk about having to take some reps off. And he has almost a walk-on mindset. This is a dude that didn't start till his 4th year in college.
Yeah.
He said, it's been so hard for me to not want every rep, to not have to get every look. And he said, so now I need to back off a little bit. And he talked about that every throw, right, that every new movement is part of his rehab. Getting opportunities to throw from different angles, doing certain things that aren't sort of in the construct of a box, right, where they can control it. It is a little more difficult, but he said that's the only way he can get back to who he was before this injury, and he's working there every single throw.
Domonique, what is with the face?
I mean, maybe people in Cincinnati care about what you talk about, but all I want to talk about is how you a real deal damn celebrity now. Talking about I'm running into Joe Burrow in France. I'm at the white party. Like, Joe Burrow risks gonna be fine. He's a hell of a quarterback. But Ryan, look at you with the short sleeve sport coat on. I didn't even know they made those. You fly. Trying to get like Graziano. Trying to get like Dan.
Please.
Hey, guys, here's the thing. I didn't know if they were going to ever invite me back. So if I only got one opportunity, I was going to try to be the flyest person there because I for sure wasn't the most popular, famous, successful, and damn sure not rich.
So we'll wait and see what winds up happening with Burrow. Yes, Mike T.
Yeah, just to jump in on the Burrow situation, which is if you're managing reps for the whole year, that does impact things. Because if you're Zach Taylor, you got to think about, hey, like, are we practicing 1 day a week in season? So even though, like, I'm sure they expect them to be ready for opening day, there is a cumulative football effect about, like, do we prepare differently? Because it's like your starting pitcher being on a pitch count.
Well, that division is fascinating, all right? So, look, you've got Lamar Jackson. He's a defending MVP. There aren't a lot of questions there. You've got Cleveland. Major questions. Is Deshaun Watson ever going to recapture any of what he was at his apex? We've got Burrow, and we all understand what's going on with the wrist. And then we get to your former team, which is the Steelers. They have a true quarterback competition, it feels like, which are pretty rare in the NFL these days. As it gets underway, how do you expect this thing to go?
I think Russell Wilson is going to be the starter. I just feel like he's not going to be as bad as he needs to be for Justin Fields to take the #1 position. And we aren't going to get to see Justin Fields do some of the things I think that can put him over the top of Russell Wilson, which is use his legs, be able to improv, push the football down the field, because Russell Wilson will be getting those #1 reps. I think he's the guy who understands processing it better. And so to me, the decision becomes, if we're in the middle of the season and they're sort of a middle of the pack team and Russell Wilson is just playing okay or just playing good football, do you look at the upside of Justin Fields? Do you look at what he can do with the arm strength, what he can do with his legs, the power he is in the red zone, and say, what? We got to take a chance on him, because we got to figure out, not only can this dude lead our team now, but can he be our franchise quarterback for the next decade? All of the talent is there. And I do believe at some point we're going to have to psychologically assess what being in Chicago did to him. Can he process? Does he overthink? Is he trying to figure out a way, will the next mistake be my last mistake? Because that's the only way we know who Justin Fields could be, and we can't figure that out while he's on the bench. But I do not believe he starts in the beginning of the season, and Russell Wilson is going to have to lose that spot or Tomlin make a decision.